share of federal funding in Hawaii, there is an interstate system in Hawaii. Even an exit for
Okay,
Pensacola.
we're recording, but we're not broadcasting.
Interstate in
Recording.
Hawaii, where you can't even go from one island to the next, much less from one state to the next. I thought, well, if this wasn't a grab for just, well, everybody else got their share of federal dollars for an interstate, we get one too. You can go to, actually, because there's so much traffic on it, the traffic moves slower on the interstate than it does just on the streets. So, hurry to get to California from Hawaii, don't take the interstate, slow traffic.
I think we're recording, correct? Okay, we're gonna start back about approval of the minutes. And Ms. Patty Hightower had a correction to the minutes.
Well, I had a question, and Ms. Rogers was here, and she may need her to answer it, but as I recall from her information that she gave us at our last meeting, when you look under chair and vice chair elections, and it states that chair was elected with a vote of 8 yes, 0 no, and 1 abstention. There were 10 of us here, and that does not add up to 10. So I think it needs to say 9. My presumption is everybody voted for it, except the one who did not.
Well, Madam Chair, I accept that friendly amendment.
It's just a correction to the minutes. Yeah.
Do we know it?
Any other, any other corrections to make?
I move that we approve the minutes as amended.
There's already a motion. Are you moving in?
I second that.
All in favor? Now we're on to the bylaws. So we had a committee meeting on, not March, now May the 3rd, 2021. And we reviewed, we had Chair Hightower, Patty Hightower, myself, Tori Woods, and David Keaton was present. We used the suggestions from Ms. Hightower and the suggestions from the judge to have come up with the draft bylaws. They were attached, so we need to have discussion. We got a motion and then a second discussion.
I move that we adopt the bylaws.
Second that, in order to facilitate discussion.
Okay, discussion.
And if anyone didn't watch the meeting, was it discussed about keeping this campaign slogan as far as the actual trust slogan?
That was not discussed. We can discuss that now.
The slogan is not really part of the bylaws, it's just.
But are you going to stay on the bylaws?
No, I mean,
What slogan are we referencing?
Yeah,
The
she-
little
the
hand.
one that we've been using, but it's not really part of the bylaws. I mean, we
The
didn't,
hand, are we talking about the hand?
yeah,
Okay.
the one that's up there now. I mean, that would be a separate discussion in my opinion, because the bylaws are the bylaws.
Well, except
But whatever you put it, whatever you decide the logo is would go there when you publish them,
so we're talking about striking the logo from the bylaws.
if that's what you want to do.
Well, I'm just thinking, I think we should have a discussion about it. Does anyone see any pros or cons to having the campaign logo on the bylaws?
Madam Chair, I believe that the community already identifies this logo with Miss Gamby Children's Trust, and I think that's, it says our children, our community, our future. I don't have any issue with keeping it. I love the fact that it has Escambia County in the palm, in case anybody missed that, I couldn't figure that out. But, I think that's another process that we would have to go through, is getting somebody to develop a new logo. I certainly am not one that would be skilled in that, so I have I've seen nothing wrong with continuing to use the one that's already been identified.
Madam Chair, and Ms. Appleyard is an expert, it says Appleyard, and we're already down for the work. For me, I see the logo, and I have no problem with this logo. School board member, as you said, I would like this to be a part of the bylaws. I would have to understand the council, why would we have the logo as a part of the bylaws? I've not ever seen that in any organization that I serve on. It's not in the policy.
It's obviously up to the discretion of this board if it wants to adopt a logo, not adopt a logo. It certainly could be included in the bylaws if you wanted to address your logo, the use of your logo as part of your bylaws, you have no.
But then if we ever want to change it in this case, ever do it, we would have to get the bylaw to change it, rather than to be able to, generically change it.
Yes, sure.
I'm good either way. If I see my needs to be part of the bylaw, I mean, to me, we shouldn't convolute the bylaw, we should make it as simplistic as possible. I don't agree more.
I think it was just, I mean, my opinion was just put on, sorry, my opinion was just put on, it was just put on there as a header, it wasn't necessarily being part of the bylaws, it's just, just instead of being like this, it's just a header of a sheet of paper, so it's not the actual bylaws.
Madam Chair, because when you look at the bylaws, underneath the logo, it says the Children's Trust of Escambia County. Fix that, change the wording. But the logo itself, I think, was, if we send this in, I mean, it'd be very simple just not to send the logo, because all we need is the words. Would that be right, Paul?
Yeah, I think it's easy to discuss just removing the logo from the bylaw document, then we can have a continued discussion of the bylaws and not have talked about the logo today.
Do you want to make a motion, Judge? Take it off the bylaws?
Not really, but if that would make it easier now that I've brought it up, I would be happy to do that.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, we'll take that off. Okay, any more discussion on the bylaws?
Judge, please proceed.
I assume that it says Escambia Children's Trust, the Independent Special District of Escambia County, that says draft bylaw of Escambia Children's Trust. Are we just talking about deleting draft and Escambia Children's Trust, so we don't have Escambia Children's Trust twice, header and stuff?
Yes.
I would like to make that change. If we could just add bylaws then to the final draft and alleviate the need for saying Escambia Children's Trust twice.
Any other discussion?
I have a question, Madam Chair, if I may, and looking back at the packet that we had received previously that had, I think, bylaws of most, if not all, of the other children's councils, and looking through them, one thing I did note, about half of them do have their logo on the front, and about half of them do not, so anyway, but that's not my question. 3 of the examples, at least 3 of them, the Children's Trust in Miami-Dade, the Children's Council of Broward, and the Children's Council of Palm Beach County, all specifically obtain wording regarding once a quorum is established, a board meeting may commence, and then goes on and specifically makes comments. All of them have a variation on this wording that says, however, a board member attending a meeting by audio, interactive, telephone conference shall not be counted to establish a quorum and shall not vote or speak. I guess I'm raising that concern. I think all of these were drafted and put into effect prior to the infamous COVID hitting, in which case I think we've all learned through a variety of different boards that I sit on and other activities that I do, including voting, taking actions, putting together budgets, etc., have all utilized, as we used over the last few days with our counselor from Tallahassee. And so I did not see anything regarding either yay or nay in our draft document, and wonder if that is something we wanted to specifically, I guess I'm raising the question, maybe even the motion, if we would specifically, unless it's not lawful to do so, put something in there about board members participating. I'm thinking particularly trying to look to the future when it's going to be a different makeup than it is here. I noticed on some of the stuff from Chief Escambia that the mayor from Century was on the board of the Chief Escambia. Mayor Hawkins was also on our board from the Healthy Start Coalition, and he drove the hour and 15 minutes from Century to Pensacola monthly, and that's one way is an hour and 15 minutes. How and why the gentleman did it is beyond me, but he did. But I'm just thinking of things that we expand to include our constituents in North Cantonment, on up to Century, et cetera. We're talking about drive times of an hour and a half or 2 hours when they've got instant communication, participation available.
Let me,
Is that something you
that,
want to
that,
look
let me
at?
stop there. There's a great suggestion. So we are under sunshine law, which is a little bit different than other laws. And so we have to abide by the sunshine, the statute, the administrative code, and the attorney general kind of opinion. And I did talk to Ms. Rogers about this earlier today. So the governor, back when the things had started, the governor suspended the regulation that you had to be present for all sunshine law meetings. You could call in, but via Zoom. He now, in November, he in fact said, he suspended that emergency declaration and said you have to be present for sunshine meeting laws. So that's why, and Ms. Rogers is here today, so she can clarify that, but you have to be present unless there's extraordinary circumstances where you would appear via Zoom. So it would be up to the board of the trust, the board and the trustee of the trust to determine what is an extraordinary circumstance if we're even going to allow Zoom. So we have to go by the law because of sunshine. Does that make sense? I'll let Ms. Rogers verify too.
It does, but again, I'm trying to think of inclusivity and cohesiveness and realities. We're asking people already to serve at no compensation, et cetera, and thinking now of the Skanska Bridge fiasco, et cetera, all of those things coming together that within our county, as our logo here shows, it's a long distance. If you make any trips to and from Century with any regularity, and if there's any way that we could put a mileage parameter on it perhaps, or something that allowed for the exception to promote, as I say, inclusivity of an entity that exists to serve the citizens throughout Escambia County.
For your actual trust members, the 10 appointed members, it doesn't work. I don't think it's working. I'm not sure what to do about it. So for the trust members, you're going to be obligated under the Sunshine Law to have a quorum physically present at the meeting, convening together. You would then be able to vote at the request of one of your members who indicates they're unable to be present in person, but they are wanting to participate in the meeting. The board could make a determination that under extraordinary circumstances as presented by this person, that they can be allowed to participate electronically. And if the board votes to allow that, then there has to be the ability in both directions to hear and be heard. Everything that happens. So it's possible to do it. I don't encourage it, but it is possible to do it. That's separate and apart from what you may want to allow for public participation. They are not going to be under that sunshine law obligation, so you can provide for some alternative avenues for participation from the public. That would be up to the board's discretion to handle.
And I follow that up with a question to someone, whether it would be yourself or someone. I just feel pretty strongly. I previously served as the Children's Medical Services Medical Director, which covered all 10 counties in the Panhandle, including those just south of the Georgia border, et cetera. And those children up there and families, I have responsibility for seeing that they got services just as much as the kid out here on North 9th Avenue. And I see us, particularly beginning this Children's Trust that is to cover all of Escambia County, having just as much responsibility for inclusivity, representation, taxation, everywhere you want to go with it, for those folks up there as we do the people that are sitting right here in front of them. And I would encourage us, and again, in this day and age of technology and whatever, to research that and come back rather than, and I value your opinion, I don't want to convey that by any means, but be able to say, we cannot do this because of blank, or we can do this and it becomes a regular portion as opposed to these others, as I said, at least 3 of the packet we had specifically said, if you're not there, you're not there. And in this day and age, I don't know these other places and the sizes of the counties, but I do know that Escambia County from Pensacola up to Century is one heck of a long drive to have expectation that the representative that may be a formal member of this board eventually at some point in time is the one expected to make that drive. And when he doesn't, then it falls into the situation where we get here, where you've had 3 absences and bang, you're off the board and all these bad things are going to happen, etc. And I guess I lean towards how can we make it work rather than how can we.
I understand the concern. The board has some legislative discretion in making the determination of what's an extraordinary circumstance. The easy ones would be obviously an infirmity, a health challenge. The COVID situation raised the specter of some additional ideas about things that may make it an extraordinary circumstance for somebody with a compromised situation, for example. Travel related is definitely something that would be something for the board to chew on and make that decision.
Well, Madam Council, if a member of the trust was represented via electronically, that doesn't be an action.
Correct. In other words, if you meet all these criteria, physical quorum present, extraordinary circumstances founded, hear and be heard in both directions, that person is allowed to participate in the meeting.
And
It's not an
they're
action.
considered present. They would be considered present.
Correct. They will be a participant in the meeting.
And from my, Madam Council, I'd love to get your advice on going a little bit for Mr. Moore. I don't know if the chair may request a member resign. Not clear. Will they be a vote on the board or they request them to resign?
I'm not exactly sure what that's.
And how do you define under restraint?
Hopefully they won't do it out of the sunshine.
Because what, are you asking who makes that decision?
Correct.
We would, right? As a board, we're the ones that would be tasked with if Dr. Northrup needed to not be here for whatever reason. Is that what you're asking?
No, the question from Commissioner May was, what does it mean when it says that the chairman would ask a member to resign?
Page 6 and 7, Article 9.
Oh, that has to do with absences, is that correct? We were discussing, and that's, I think, in all of the other bylaws where we're, but again, it's at the discretion of the board. You say 3 absences, but should someone have, like for the summer, you're gone and that kind of stuff. So.
No, in fact, I agree with that, but it says the chair will request, it doesn't define that it will be voted on by the board. And so, I think maybe we define that, and so, maybe some language that says excused or unexcused or.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you want to change that, amend that part. Okay.
No,
Would you like to?
I'm just
discuss the
going
language?
along with.
Dr. Northrup was talking about people being able to call in via Zoom or, board members calling. So you wanted to research that more, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we would like to research that and maybe bring that back to us the next meeting. Is that something you would like to do?
I would like to remind everyone that they can be amended. And, at any time that you have an amendment, at this particular time, we don't have anyone sitting on the trust from Century. We are televised so people can participate. And so I think that would be something that we could ask somebody to do some research on and make an amendment at that time if we felt like we needed to.
If I could just state for the record, I believe this is my 5th meeting, and I have to drive 3 hours to get here. So I think it's important, so I'm here.
And
So
also,
I think anybody who's going to participate in the trust will have that same for action.
Yeah, I think there's another workaround too, is that we could find alternative locations if that became an issue, such as Molino Park Elementary School, where we could set up technology to live stream and so forth. So there could be some workarounds to this situation.
So, I mean, Madam Chair, sorry if I erred on maybe an analogy between my concern and Michael Norton. It's realistic that JJ has a trial every month on the same day as 3 consecutive. This is, I think that's extreme.
Yeah, it said the chair may request, it didn't say shall request, so.
And I like that.
There's a difference between may and shall, and we would have to
So,
vote.
and one thing that I would say, I mean, I don't think you can kick me off, but I think that the chair may recommend to the board.
So you want to change it to the chair may recommend as a request? Okay.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so we're changing the chair
I
may.
oppose.
You're
Yeah,
opposed.
oppose.
You're opposed, sorry, you're
Yes.
opposed. So 2 opposed. So this may recommend said member to resign from the board. Any other discussion, motions on the bylaws?
I have a couple of commas, if you want to go through those quickly.
Go
I
through
already have
those.
my pages.
Let's do them all in one, let's do them all in one
Discussion.
motion.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. On page 3 of 7, under minutes, unless otherwise shown by the minutes, comma. One of my concerns, of course, the formatting will be changed now if there's no logo and we're deleting one of the fits header lines, but making sure that none of these sections begin at the bottom of a page, such as section 2 recording, and page, at the bottom of page 4, section 2 recording, it's the start of the paragraph without any body. So just make sure there's a start at the bottom. Page 5 of 7, under 2, it says, the employment, blah, 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 subject to review and concurrence by the trust for approval of the budget. Is that board? Because we've been using the board throughout, and I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, it's we.
Page 6 and 7, Article 7C, it's spelled out chapter, everywhere else.
Oh, yes.
And I believe that's all I have. Want to make sure our bylaws reflect our professionalism, make sure we get all the covered, so
Right, so
appreciate
that's-
patience.
The judge's motion to change those.
Those are basically screwed retrievers. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Madam Chair, I have a discussion item. I'm sorry. There's a reference to committees in the bylaws that says that the board can have standing committees. Earlier in the bylaws, it references 2 committees, one called executive committee and one budget planning committee. I believe that it says that we can vote on having standing committees. And the question I'm having is if we vote on the bylaws tonight, are we voting to establish an executive committee and a budget planning committee because they are mentioned in the bylaws, but they're not mentioned on the committees? Just a question. And I'm not sure that they're necessary to be referenced, although they are under the duties of those positions.
So we could do standing committees, comma, such as the executive committee and the budget. Are you okay with that? Because it allows us to have more city committees.
Yeah, my only question is, if we vote tonight, is actually establishing those committees. Because they're referenced, and we would be including them in our bylaws, not how we could not establish them if they're they're in our bylaws.
So we will be
If we're not
establishing,
going to establish them, then we need to take them out. It's more about should we remove them than should we add them somewhere else.
I agree. I think we just missed that point because we discussed standing committees, but I think we forgot that they were listed. I forgot. I won't say we. I forgot as I was going through. I didn't
And
catch
I
that.
have
so.
no issue with having an executive committee, having a budget planning committee. I just want to make sure that by voting for them, we all know what we're doing. We're also voting that those are existing committees.
we are going to vote, as you see, on our treasurer in a little bit, so that's part of the executive committee. And then one of my goals is to have a budget planning committee. So we will be doing that hopefully tonight.
So it's appropriate to leave them as they are.
Yes, sir.
Perfectly fine.
Comments, questions, concerns? All right. So are we ready? Are we still on recording? Even though we're not?
He basically said they're working on it, we can speak up all the better.
Okay. So are we ready to make a motion to approve the bylaws? Well, okay, the vote on the bylaws, we vote on it with all the discussion and
Did we not vote on the bylaws?
we had discussion, we haven't approved it yet.
My promise.
We approved it, no, we did it in segments. Just not Robert rules and sure.
I mean, I would move the bylaws as amended by
Okay.
everything that's said.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Number 3, PowerPoint presentation. Mr.
Maybe we're
Rogers.
talking, we're moving.
Woo, okay.
All right. Ms. Appleyard asked me to discuss with you the issue of conflicts of interest. We did touch a little bit on the category of conflicts of interest at our last meeting. So, to get more specifically into the issue of conflicts of interest, you each have at your workstations a binder that looks like this. All right? There's quite a bit of information in here. I don't need to go through all of it with you tonight. I think for tonight's purposes.
And to address whether or not you want to adopt any kind of disclosure or something like that for you guys as a board on the front end before you get into your more specific work later on, I can hit just sort of some high points for you this evening. Let's start with the concept that there are essentially 3 layers of prohibitions or regulations associated with conflicts of interest for purposes of you as a public body. The first one is the legislative intent that's memorialized in Florida law. And the legislative intent is something like the idea that you hold your positions for the public benefit, not for your own benefit. And you are not to have any interest, financial or otherwise, direct or indirect, or engage in any business transaction or professional activity or incur an obligation which is in substantial conflict with your duties and obligations as a member of this board. That's kind of it's a sort of a philosophical idea, but that is the first layer, and that's the legislative intent. The second layer is your relationships, usually your financial or your business relationships, but your relationships. And generally, I would describe that layer of regulation as being that you're not supposed to have a conflicting employment or contractual relationship. So you are not, for example, supposed to, as a board member, also have a contract or an arrangement or an agreement with the trust. You're not supposed to be regulated by the trust. You're not supposed to be engaged in a relationship, a business, something where you're under contract, where you're in a relationship with the trust, because that would be considered to be in conflict under state law. Those are the first 2 layers. And with regards to the first 2 layers, there's not a specific obligation to you under state law at this moment that you fill out any specific form. These are the ideas you're supposed to march off into your work and your duties knowing, and then you're supposed to deal with voting conflicts, which is the 3rd layer, as we go along. However, if you look at tab 6, and it was also in your agenda, it was hyperlinked for you, there are some children's trusts that have made it an obligation of membership of their trust that you do a proactive disclosure so that everybody knows where you're coming from. You can certainly agree that you want to obligate yourselves to do these sorts of disclosures and make them a part of your written record to be kept as a public record for all to see. This is just an example, and you can also see under the subsequent tabs 7 and 8, some of these children's trusts have made this type of thing. You can build it into your bylaws. I know you've voted on your bylaws. You don't have to make this a part of your bylaws. You can, by vote, simply say that you want to have a form like this where you all disclose who you're employed by, what nonprofits you serve on, those kinds of relationships you have in your day-to-day lives that might present long-standing issues so that the public will know where you're coming from. This is something totally separate, apart, in addition to your standing legal obligation with regards to voting conflicts. And we did talk about that a little bit at the last meeting, but it's under tab 1 in your materials there in your binder, and this describes exactly when you would have a voting conflict. This needs to be considered for every agenda item on your agendas going forward. And these are very, very fact-specific determinations. You may not vote on anything that would inure to your special private gain or loss, the special private gain or loss of your relative, of your business associate, or a principal by whom you are retained, which I generally would say would be your employer, but it could be other things as well. These are extremely fact-specific determinations, and there's a very specific form. We actually had one by the judge that was filled out from your last meeting, and it's in your backup materials here. It's under tab 8, I think, maybe not. Anyway, it's Memorandum of Voting Conflict, Form 8B. 3, and I thank you, and I have given you also behind the form, I've given you a copy of one that was filled out by one of my former commissioners, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. It is absolutely necessary that you fill this form out, and it needs to be made a part of the minutes. The sooner you realize you have a potential conflict, the better. I would highly recommend, when possible, to have the form filled out prior to the meeting, make it available to your colleagues prior to the meeting when possible through either the attorney or the administrator, not directly. And if you're not aware that there's an item on an agenda where you may have a conflict and you learn during the meeting you have a conflict, we need to get the form filled out as soon as possible. It has to be made a part of the record within 15 days. And if you are going to speak in any way about the item that you have the conflict on, you need to make sure that it's disclosed immediately to your members what your conflict is. This is an obligation. You have to do this, regardless of what you as a trust may or may not want to do in your bylaws, whatever. This is mandatory, and it does apply to each and every vote that you take if you have a conflict of interest. I think for purposes of this evening, the thing that Ms. Appleyard was wanting you all to discuss is whether or not the board is interested in the use of and adopting a form similar to the one that's at tab 6. This was what was hyperlinked in your materials for your agenda. This is not mandatory under state law, but you as a trust may want to do this. I also say that these prohibitions on conflicts of interest could potentially be something that might disqualify you, for example, from service on this board. If you're going to have a long-standing and continual conflict, if you wish to do business with the trust for some reason, you also cannot serve on the trust. There may be things that would disqualify you. So if you have that sort of potential relationship or want to have a relationship, I would suggest that you get with me offline and let's talk it through, because you don't want to get too far down the road and then realize that there's a problem like that. So I think for now, yes, Ms. Hightower.
I just want to, sometimes we want to be sure, like if you sit on a board of a group that might be applying, we get nothing from that. We're not getting compensated. We're not a compensated board member. But, I think that's one reason I looked at I think about Impact 100 and the fact that we all have to disclose what boards we sit on, just so people know that if you're sitting on a committee and you have some knowledge about that particular group. But would you advise that you'd have to recuse yourself there because you're not really making money, but you just are sitting on that board?
So it's a very interesting question because it's a little bit of a gray area. Just because it is a nonprofit or a charity does not necessarily mean that you do not have a conflict of interest, and it may not mean that you may or may not have a voting conflict as well. Just because it's nonprofit, just because you're unpaid, does not mean that there's not a conflict there. Very, very fact-specific determinations. I would say the most concerning thing would be is if you are a board member or a deciding policymaker or a treasurer of a nonprofit, and you're in a situation where you may be potentially asking for and or receiving funds from the board that you sit on here. That can raise some concerns and some questions. So if you find that you're in that kind of situation, let's get in offline somewhere and have a one-on-one and walk it through. It may or may not disqualify you from either voting and or potentially even being on one or the other of those positions.
Just a comment to that. To me, and my experience with these, it's all about the transparency and the visual that comes from the public to that issue. As we've all learned in Sarbanes-Oxley, there's a lot of governance issues with boards that create fiduciary responsibilities. Even though you may not be a paid member, you still may have liability issues as a board member. And there is a direct connection between the funding made available to an organization and that organization's financial position. And that could be easily extrapolated by the public to say that there is a conflict just because you sit on the board. So I would always view it from the public's view, and it's very easy to see how those kinds of things would be best to opt out from that kind of a vote and just say, I need to recuse myself from that particular vote, turn in a form, identify yourself as a board member, and that way it's completely transparent and the conflict can never be raised at that point.
True, but it is also, just to make sure I'm crystal clear, there are some relationships that a voting abstention will not resolve. There are some relationships alone that cannot exist. You cannot, for example, sell your services to the trust and also serve on the trust. I mean, that's just a basic example.
Yeah, and I think you raised the idea of the intent to do future business also.
Correct.
Is a very environment, like, for example, I'm retiring in 2 years. So if I know in 2 years I'm going to go work for a nonprofit in Pensacola that's going to make a lot of money off the trust, I need to be talking about that now and excuse myself from the trust because that's in my planning for the future. So that would be something that as a board member you would need to know and disclose as soon as that item came up.
And Allison, with that, I mean, I couldn't come off the county commission and go and work for someone that's receiving funding. Isn't there a dead period that I got to wait multiple years before I can go work for an organization that receives funds?
So yes, you cannot, as the elected official, go back and lobby for money before your own board for 2 years.
Right.
So I think the question for this evening was whether or not you wish to adopt some sort of form for the sake, really, I think, of transparency, for the record, for the public, and for each other, something that looks like this at tab 6.
And else, I mean, there's no way that those of us, I mean, I serve on at least 5 children boards. I mean, so there's no way, I mean, but as long as I disclose and I'm not getting anything out of it, I can say I'm not going to vote on it, correct?
Well, this is what Ms. Hightower was talking about. So Usually, yes, that is true usually, but there are sometimes going to be relationships that cannot coexist together. So it may mean that you would need to pick one or the other. Usually when you start talking about charities, the first question is, well, are you just a member, or are you like one of the deciding policymakers? Are you the chairman, the president? Are you the treasurer? Are you what's your role? And then just because it's a charity doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay to do it. We really want to walk through it and analyze it and see what your role is with that charity. And
But like we do at the county, I mean, if I voted for community action, Doug's out there, and I'm sure he's going to apply for money, we would get an opinion of the Commission on Ethics, correct?
right, so it may require that I may advise, well, that's a really unique situation. Let's get an opinion from the Commission on Ethics. We can certainly do that. I have good results getting on the phone with them, even if we just want a quick and easy answer, or maybe it's more convoluted and we can ask for a written opinion. Sometimes when you have public entities, especially like a community action and the Board of County Commissioners, that's an easy example. They have unity of purpose. It's common a commissioner serves on that board, and there are a number of boards like that. The PEDC, for example, the state law says that you're going to have a couple of county commissioners on that board, so you're obligated, and just because the BCC may be giving money to the PEDC, that's not necessarily a problem, because state law says that relationship must exist. So they're all very fact specific. So to that end, I really do urge you early and often to look at your agendas, what's on the agenda. If you see something that looks familiar, look in the backup. I mean, being prepared is the number one easiest way to help stay out of trouble. And
Well, the best advice you and Ginger ever gave is just full disclosure.
full disclosure.
Yeah.
And when in doubt, I usually do advise to abstain from voting and fill out the voting conflict memo. I've seen a lot of people get caught by the Commission on Ethics for not abstaining. I've never seen somebody get in trouble for abstaining. So it's a good rule to live with. It's true.
Madam Chair, I just want to share a thought that I have about this, and thank you for that information, very helpful. I think we look at ourselves as a board, but we also look at ourselves as a board 10 years or number of years down the road, and people will come and go off of this board. I would be in favor of having a statement similar to tab 6, although I would like it to be crafted. I would suggest we craft it a little differently, with more of a general expectation for board members on conflict of interest, and maybe a couple steps of procedures. If we have a question, here's what we do to follow through with that. I think it also should be written in a language that is widespread, a wide range of readership can digest this type of form, and it's very clear and concise.
Is that a motion? Go ahead.
Yes, I move to make that as a motion. Yes,
And I'll second it. Any more any discussion on?
Yeah, I wanted to just raise, there's additional tabs here that look to be some ethics policies that the Miami's Children's Trust used, and in it, there's some very plain language about expectations as to what board members can and can't do, or what board members should and shouldn't disclose. And I wondered if we, as a board, were going to propose a conflict of interest or ethics policy, and wouldn't then this form be part of that policy, so that we could look at the language, discuss the content, make sure it's plain language, and go from that perspective, as opposed to just presenting a form, but actually talk about having a policy for the board.
I think we talked about it briefly at our bylaws committee, that we probably need a policy manual, and this would be one of the things that as we develop, I think that I noticed several of the trust boards had policies in addition to their bylaws that would deal with, who can vote when, and all of those kind of things that are the day-to-day operations. And so, yeah, I think the full development of a conflict of interest policy with all of these things would be good. I agree with that.
Any more discussion? So, just to be clarified, the motion is to make a conflict of interest form, and then with the plain language, with policies maybe later. Do we amend that motion or not even amend it?
Did you want to amend the motion so that it includes the policy?
As a friendly amendment, yes.
All right. Second.
Parliamentary procedure says there's no friendly, you just have to make amendments.
Second.
So yes, I move that the form be rewritten so that it's in plain language, but be supported by a policy developed by the board to cover all conflict of interest in voting issues.
Okay. Second. All in discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll make, and so I would move that with the bylaws committee possibly get back together to come up with that. Is that okay, bylaws committee? Okay.
Would it be possible to ask Ms. Rogers to be able to attend that meeting? It would be helpful to have somebody with the legal expertise with that, I think.
She's smiling.
Yeah. We can have somebody there.
Okay, do we need to make a motion or that? No. Okay, all right, let's move forward. Okay. Next, I lost my minutes here. Our next agenda, election of a treasurer. So the statute says that the statute doesn't say we have to have a treasurer, but the statute, but we've decided, well, we think we need a treasurer. And also the budget committee needs to have a treasurer. So I would make a motion, or I would make a move that we would have a treasurer for our trust. That's a long, convoluted way
I
to say
think the
that.
bylaws already say that we have a treasurer.
The bylaws do say that.
We just
I was
haven't
thinking the
elected
statute,
one yet.
yes. So we need to elect a treasurer.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I haven't asked him yet, but I'd like to nominate Dr. Smith because he has a business background, and I think that this person doesn't actually do the books. They're just the chair of the finance committee, correct?
Let's look at the bylaws.
And that's what the bylaws basically say. We're going to have to hire a CFO.
Yes,
to
well,
actually
they
do.
preside over the Escambia Children's
Pat,
Trust
if Dr.
budget.
Smith accepts, I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on Dr. Smith?
Except.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of Dr. Smith as a treasurer?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
Okay, good. We're moving right along. Okay. Number 4, discussion on legal services. So at the last meeting on April 27th, Ms. Hightower asked for Carolyn and I to discuss legal services. So we have been meeting, we have been discussing, we've come round and about. So this is where we finally are. We can we can proceed with an RFP, request for proposal, to have our own attorney. We have to have criteria for that. We have to have a scoring, we have to advertise it. We have to, and that goes back to that website. We have to talk about the website for that, and we need another lovely committee to do all that work, unless we want to do it all together. In the meantime, we have talked about having an interlocal agreement with legal services with the county, just through September 30th, or until we can get our own attorney in pursuit. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have past experience with Chapter 287, and my memory was that there's an exemption for legal services under Chapter 287, which means you don't have to procure it through a competitive procurement. And I think that was specifically set up to allow for it not to be a cumbersome environment to retain a legal service. I certainly would be corrected if I'm wrong, but that was my memory of that statute. Just so you're aware that it may not be a cumbersome process.
Okay. Well, we wanted to make it we want to be transparent and fair and open it up to whatever attorney would like to do it. So we've talked to Michelle Watson, we've talked to the county, we've talked to the city, we've talked to the procurement office, and this is where but that's wonderful that we did not hear that one. So, Judge, what do you need to say?
I think I just had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that you had come up with an agreement with the county?
We have not come up with an agreement yet,
okay.
but that is an option to pursue an interlocal agreement with the county until we have put it on the website to advertise for our own attorney and which firm wants to take part in that. So that's where we are. Any other comments on that? So my suggestion, I move that we would need to start a subcommittee to look into hiring an attorney and doing either the 287 and doing the exemption for it, or figure out if we want to do an RFP to make it open and transparent so any law firm can request.
Not to be part of that committee.
I was going to make you chair.
Madam Chair, is there, in your motion or your idea for a motion, is it include an interim solution prior to that?
The interim solution is to work with the county,
For just attorney support, legal services
right,
support.
for legal services. We really need an attorney right now to help us with the trim process.
Yes.
That's what we really need for it. Also to answer questions, like we've asked Ms. Rogers several questions now already. So we really need, and to help with all the paperwork for trim process, because it's rather large.
Do you know the potential duration of that interim support? Because if it could last till an executive director is established and that person be able to hire and recruit an attorney, it just seems a lot cleaner, but I don't know if the county is willing to support us for several months.
We would go ahead.
Because I think that when we were meeting prior, that the question was, and Commissioner May, you being part of that conversation on both sides, as I look at this agreement, this would be a contract where funds would be expended. So I guess my question is, if we decided to contract through an interlocal agreement with the county for legal services, is this document something that was proposed that we would do, or is this something as a model?
I have not seen this document. This was the first time I've seen it.
I didn't put the document together.
I think Ms. Rogers put the document on
But
there.
because I can't remember from the conversation the commissioner
Yeah, I
said
had nothing to do
whether
with the document, no.
Yeah, whether we would be charged or not.
Right, yeah, no.
Yeah, okay.
I've not been a part of a document at all.
It's true. I brought the document, distributed one to each of your workstations. I prepared a very rough draft of an interlocal on the request of Ms. Appleyard to, if I could do something like that for this evening. That is literally the Alachua County interlocal, but with some of the words exchanged for Escambia County and some of those other little details that are unique to Escambia County inserted in there. The figures that you see are the figures that are in the interlocal in Alachua County. So I'm not saying one way or the other whether those are even close to appropriate or whether or not a figure is even necessary. This is just the Alachua County version. And I also have no idea how the Board of County Commissioners feels about any of this, other than the board has voted to allow us and our administrator to provide services for the foreseeable future, and they've waived any conflict of interest for us that may raise. So even if you all voted to go forward with a certain interlocal, it still would be, in that case, it's a three-party agreement with the clerk of their court. So any interlocal...
Well, Madam Counsel, we have agreed and voted for legal and administration to provide support staff. We have done that officially.
Yes, we have pretty broad support from the board in their vote to provide all sorts of things, office supplies to the extent necessary, reasonable support from administration, administrative staff. Zanani's here this evening. My staff, yes, we have support by board vote to do that for the foreseeable future.
And Patty, I had not seen that document, and so
That is true.
I literally have not seen it, and I misspoke when I was talking about Clark Partington with Will, but I do agree with my colleague on the end that as Carolyn transitions with the CEO, that they have the opportunity to pick their team to fail or to succeed. And so I think that Allison and our staff is more than equipped. I mean, they wrote the ordinance, they wrote the interlocal. She has a staff that's in place. She's eager to do it, has a passionate staff. So I don't disagree with my colleague at the end, if that's what you want to do.
Madam Chair, I think that was just that's I think where my confusion lied, because I thought they were already doing that, and I didn't know if there had been a change that now required money that we haven't got. Yes.
Madam President, so is this saying that this is the county of Alachua? This is what they were doing in the interim before? And so
Yes.
since they were doing on the interim, this is an example of them moving forward to do it as long as it needs to be done, right?
That's what we're,
So
Well-
that answers my question, that we have an example of what was already done by another county. I think it's great.
I think it was a multi-year arrangement. I mean, I think that the Alachua County BCC staff and the Alachua County Attorney's Office both have served in the capacity of support on contract, basically, for the trust for at least a couple, 2-3 years at
They
least.
only started in 18, so, and
Two-
they're.
2 to
and
3
they're-
years.
Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with the Alachua Trust. I know that they were having some conversations about whether to continue that
Yeah.
relationship or to
Right.
go out with other ideas about who would serve them.
The other part of this that we haven't discussed is, because we just looked at this, but this talks about provisions for payroll services, which, as we move forward with an executive director, we will have a need for that. So I don't know whether we just, have you had any conversations, Ms. Appleyard, about payroll or with the county, or, because I know we're not paying you, I'm sorry.
I'm working on a draft budget, and we're just going to kind of plug in numbers now that we have a treasurer.
Okay.
We can bring that back shortly. Personally, I think if the county has allowed for us to continue, and if with promises that we are working on it, we need to get to trim with experienced staff.
Yeah.
But then it'll be the next thing
Right.
on the list.
Yeah, I agree with,
Yeah.
I agree with Mrs. Appleyard. I mean, they do it every day. I mean, and Avalon and millage rates and trim notices. And so I don't think there's anyone better equipped in Allison's office to do it. And I certainly think once we hire staff, Patty, we certainly have to have our own payroll company. I mean, once we get funding, but at this point, we might even vote it on, the bank, the income and those type of things.
Okay. One other quick question. Do we need to have any kind of an agreement that says that the county is doing these services for us?
You don't have to have a written agreement.
Okay.
I think at the minimum, it does make some sense that there at least be a vote of the trust for at least for the legal piece of it. I would think for ethical reasons for the attorney that it helps to at least have it memorialized. It's a two-way street. The county commission had to agree to allow us to do this, but it's a bilateral thing. I'm not necessarily someone's attorney unless they say they want me to be their attorney. So I think, and it's same for administrative staff as well. I do think it makes sense at a minimum that there be a vote to memorialize what the relationship is for everyone involved. It makes, I think, better sense to do it that way. And just as I know I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but in the county structure, it's actually, payroll is actually under the clerk of court. It's not under the BCC. So just that may help also. I see that in that case, the clerk was doing the auditing and all that kind of stuff. In Escambia County, it would, if you got to the point of needing payroll and those sorts of services, they're actually under the clerk.
But we do have precedent, Madam Council, HRC, PDC, where
Yes.
payroll comes from Landrums or Blue Arbor, and they're still legal, provided by county. I mean, we never separate payroll with the county. I mean, we never combine payroll with the county. That's a separate entity. Because we'd be
Right,
literally
I just-
contracting to you. We'd be contracting with you, whether it's contracted for pay or just contracted for.
I'm not necessarily
pro
talking
bono.
about me so much as I mean, like, in the future, if the trust has its own staff,
Right.
if you're, and it is possible to ask that they be allowed on county benefits, county HR, that sort of
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
That's
like the housing-
possible.
Yeah, like the housing trust fund.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
that's true.
But it would require
Yeah.
the clerk's participation as well.
Because we're on the legal discussion, I would be willing to make a motion that we, as the Children's Trust, what's the word I want? Accept the, the county's provision to provide legal services and support. That cover
So
everything?
moved.
Second.
Second.
All
Ma-
in, any
Madam Chair,
discussion? Yes.
Madam Chair, and I certainly support that school board member Hightower. But even in the recruiting and what Carolyn's going to have to do, one of the reasons with our housing trust fund and many back in neighborhood enterprises, the reason that it made sense for payroll through the county is because of benefits to be able to attract employees. And so sometimes independent payroll companies don't provide the type of insurance and retirement benefits that allows for you to recruit the best employees. And I'm not saying we need to do that, but certainly would love for legal and Carolyn to explore all of the options on employment so we can recruit the best people.
Mr. Peden?
Yes, and I appreciate the county's willingness to help, but I do think when Madam Attorney and the other staff, they didn't necessarily sign up for this. And so the board appreciate the county, and I want them to be involved, but I think we ought to look at their compensation as some type of formality for your time tonight and for Allison's, and if they want to turn that down. But I don't know, I guess when you get hired, it's always that little line under all other related duties, and then maybe that falls under that. But I want to I want to recognize that things change and a lot of work, they've got their own jobs to deal with. But if there's a way to compensate them and have it more formal, I'd be for that. And that's something we can explore if the board is willing.
I agree. Yeah, I like that idea because this is not.
If I may, my board has said it's okay for me to be here, and that would include my staff. I think this arrangement that Alachua County has would be paying the county for the time of their staff and resources, not the individuals who were there. So it's essentially reimbursing the county for the expense that they have for keeping us. So it would not be to the
Well, I think
individuals.
that's what he meant. I don't think he meant to pay.
And I'm not saying that our board has not discussed that that's necessary. I'm just saying that this is one of the ideas that's out there.
And again, I think just point of clarification, we're not talking about adopting this interlocal agreement. We're just talking about memorializing the county's involvement for legal service.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And before we take the vote, I feel the need to just disclose that, quite frankly, I feel like by very essence of being assigned to this board, I'm going to be disclosing for a while my relationship with the county if the county appears in front of me in a lawsuit. But at this point, I think the damage is done whether I vote or not, as far as that goes. And so I do plan to vote. But again, the county may likely appear in front of me in proceedings.
Wow.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion by Ms. Hightower in the second?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, so that passes. So thank you, Ms. Rogers and your staff for helping us. Okay, next, finance discussion.
Madam Chair, if I
Yes,
can,
sir.
I've got a question real
Yes, sir.
quick on what we just voted and approved and all that. Will the letter or whatever, the memo of agreement or memorandum of understanding, whatever that memorializes it, as we just voted to do, come before us so we know we're aware of what it actually looks like and says, or is it basically going to be the prior
No, it's not
lengthy
going to be
legal
this.
document?
No, sir. It's going to be just that I don't know if we.
I think it would just be reflected in the minutes that we did this.
Okay.
All right, finance discussion. Under finance, we have bank, director and officers, insurance, and budget. So Carol and I also have met and talked about banks, and once again, we want to be transparent. We want to let every bank who wants to be our bank and hold our money to have an option to do that. We did learn that public funds, that there's a requirement that the money must be securitized, so that requires some different banks than other banks, and we have to have a request for proposal, proposal to do all that. So, all that being said, we kind of need a subcommittee, and we were going to let Dr. Smith be in charge of the banking and the administrative subcommittee if he would like to help do an RFP and pick the bank. So, yeah. So that's the discussion on the bank issues, is that there's a lot to choose from.
Madam Chair, before
Yes,
we
sir.
leave this agenda item, I know that committee is a very appropriate thing to do. Just as a reference point or point of information, in the Leon County meeting we had last Thursday night, which was the original organizing meeting, we voted as a board to allow the chair to meet with the county to establish a letter of credit, which would provide funding to the trust that would have some ability to then have some finances to work from. I think if I remember the TRIM discussion, if we choose to go forward with TRIM this summer, the revenues could come in this fall. If we choose to go forward with TRIM next summer, they wouldn't come in until next fall.
Right.
So there's still a time gap between now and whenever that would be. And I thought this might be a good item to raise that. If you have or haven't had that discussion, I didn't see anywhere else on the
We
agenda
have,
that
yes.
would be.
Thank you for reminding me. So we did, Caroline, I had to talk about line of credit. You know, if the county is willing, we could do a line of credit from there. We don't really need much money right now. I mean, we talked about attorneys, but we don't have to pay for the attorney right now. And we have staff that's volunteering themselves. And so we really just need, so we don't really need much money right now until we get our millage, until we get our.
Yeah, it was, when you start pushing things out like RFPs and other things,
Right.
there might be mail costs, there might be inbound costs, there
Right.
may be things the county doesn't want to absorb that if we had a line of credit for, that would give us some flexibility. And one of the discussion points is the reimbursement of that line of credit and how long it could be, because you don't want to have it dependent on revenues coming in this fall, because it actually forces your hand if you do that. So if it is a line of credit and if it's a small one, maybe it could be reimbursed next year as opposed to the current year. This is a discussion.
I guess we would have to make a motion to ask the county commission. There was a discussion with the county commission earlier that did not go well. So that's,
Well, and that was for a large amount, correct?
well, yeah, well, it was for 250,000, I think.
I don't think we need.
So, I mean, I think now if we go to the budget part, maybe that answers the question. How much money
Yeah,
we're
I
talking
think,
about.
and school board member, when we say that the conversation didn't go well, it went the same reason that many organizations come to us and say, hey, give us $250,000, and we don't have a budget. I mean, we don't, what's the line item? I think that if there was a realistic budget that came before the commission, saying exactly how those funds would be utilized, I think it could fall, on supportive ears. But I mean, to blanket, to pull a number out of the sky and say we need $250,000 was not going to be supported by me, and certainly my colleagues expressed that as well. So I think if you had that budget for how it's going to benefit the community, you probably would find some attentive ears. I can't speak of how anyone would vote, but as my colleague on the end has just said, that how it's repaid, and at the end of the day, you're not borrowing from anyone but yourself, because it's all taxpayers' dollars. So I think if we gave our executive director the opportunity to somewhat put together a budget, and as chairperson has said, it's much different than the anticipated budget of what we thought we were going to have initially in terms of expenditures.
Right. And if we meet the July 1 deadline, we should be getting our funds, November, December timeframe.
Absolutely.
So, it's already May, so, and we don't have many funds right now to expend because we have attorney and staff basically given to us already, so.
Right. So, I mean, Madam Executive, to me, Madam Chair, and I'm only speaking for the guy that sits at the end by the door for exit purposes, if she could come back with a budget, I mean, I would bring that forward to the county commission, but I'm open to any funding sources that you want to do.
Okay, and so I would move that we would let Dr. Smith establish a committee to work on either a line of credit, to work on a budget, and to move forward with the budget, the directors and officers, and the D&O insurance. Amy Lavoie, who was with the county and now is head of finance at the city, has an RFP for insurance brokers that she just did, and she's going to offer to give us that. So I would ask to let Dr. Smith set up a committee to work on all three of those things.
Have you given him any other people besides?
No, no, that's the next thing. We have to do the next thing. So would anyone like to be on Dr. Smith's committee?
I'll serve with Dr. Smith.
Okay, and I'll be on there, and Tori.
Is there somebody else down there?
David. And also, do you have that slideshow presentation, Janice, that I put together? There it is. Okay, this is perfect. I did this afternoon at like 3:30. Okay. So do we need a motion for a subcommittee? Probably so. For the bank?
The bylaw says you have the ability to appoint them.
Well,
Okay,
is this
well,
not the finance plan?
It is.
one?
Yes. So no, we don't need a motion for that. So, okay. So also on the budget, I wanted to go through, because we keep talking about the trim process. We have to by July 1st. So the statute, whoever's clicking is doing a great job. Thank you. The statute says on or before July 1st of each year that we must prepare a tentative annual written budget of the district's income and expenditures. That's the first thing. The second thing we have to do is compute a proposed millage rate within the voter approved cap necessary to fund the tentative budget and comply with the provisions of the trim and relating to the method of fixing millage, and shall fix the final millage by resolution of the council. So, next slide. Okay, so by July 1st, we have to determine a tentative budget, so we have 2 months for that. And we also have to determine the millage rate within the voter cap, which is a half mil. And then on July 1st, the property appraiser certifies a taxable rate value, and those are the statutes that said that. And then within 35 days, we have to fill out the trim forms and submit that to the property appraiser. So we have to determine the tentative budget, and number 2, determine the millage rate that we're going to use. We can choose up to a half mil. We can choose another percentage, like a fourth of a mil, and increase the amount in the later years. So as I've been working with Carolyn this week and just kind of thinking the chicken versus the egg, we can either make a budget and then determine the millage rate, or we can determine the millage rate first and then the budget from there. My inclination, and I'm just one person, is to determine the millage rate first and then the budget. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as it says, the taxable property value, the millage rate chosen will determine the budget for the trust. So in 2019, I got all this from the Chris Jones, the property appraiser, and it's not correct blue book form, Judge, so don't judge. The 2019 taxable property value rate was $18 billion. A half mil of that is about $9 million, not taking into account early payment uncollectibles, and a quarter of a mil is $4 million. And that in 2020, it shows you what it is. So it's about $8 million would be the budget if we did a half mil. So my recommendation is, you can do the next slide, is to go ahead and choose what millage we're going to do so we can choose a budget. And this came from Chris Jones as well, is a man named Bubba Peters. Yes, thank you. He helped to fill this out. This example, if we choose a half mil, if we're going to say we're going to choose the half mil, it breaks it down what the average in 2019, the residential taxable value was per district, and the average annual residential ad valorem tax increase. So in District 1, the average person who owns a house would pay an additional $35.41 per year for a $500,000 for the trust. So that's all I have on my slides. Thank you. But I've been getting when you get so much bombarded at you, they're just gonna make it simple. We have to have a budget by July 1, we have to choose the millage. So so we need to, those are the two things we've got to figure out by July 1. That's all I have. So if we want to make discuss millage tonight on the budget, so Dr. Smith and his committee can move forward and figure out, okay, we're going to go by $8 million, we're going to do $4 million, what it's going to be in our trust starting November.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Because millage wasn't agended, I don't know that the public would know to be here to have a public discussion on millage. Budget was agended.
Budget was it.
So I would just coach us to stick to
Hold off on
budget
that.
tonight.
Okay.
Because that's what was on the agenda, and that we maybe have an agenda item on the next meeting that's labeled
Okay.
millage, so that the public knows that's going to get discussed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Madam Chair, I would like to just reiterate or follow up with your comment about the millage being determined first, then the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I think is, I'm thinking that doesn't impede on this agenda, but I would just, I think that makes a good financial approach.
I appreciate your leadership. Great.
Ms. Rogers.
Just don't want you guys to get too far
I
down the
know.
road. Number one, the statute does specifically say that the council shall compute a proposed millage rate within the voter-approved cap necessary to fund the tentative budget. So that makes it sound like you need a tentative budget to know what you're trying to fund. The other thing is, to set millage, it's very specific statutorily,
Right.
very specific. So that's, even if you put it on an agenda, that's not going to be sufficient enough to set the millage. You can certainly
Right,
have
we
very
have to
vague
have-
conversations about it, but
We gotta have
The
public
public-
hearings and the
the
whole
public
9
hearings
yards.
Right.
You know,
afterwards.
but I mean,
And a
literally
millage
what the
resolution.
chairperson said, Madam Council, makes a lot of sense. She said a 0.5 millage, right, a half a mil,
Right.
a quarter of a mil, and then we could direct our executive director to bring back 2 budgets without us voting upon it. We already have a needs assessment, I mean, because we gotta have that. And then as it's been stated, then you can have that conversation, but at least she's putting the conversation out there with our options. And so you can work toward 2 different budgets, saying, and the executive director can bring that back.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree at all. I just want to make sure you all understand, your statute specifically says to fund your tentative budget.
Right.
So that's
Whichever one we so choose.
Whichever one you choose.
Whichever one we so choose. I mean, she
So-
can bring back 3
so
budgets.
What I'm hearing Ms. Rogers say is that if we decided to go with a 0.5, then we make a budget that spends 0.5.
Right.
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 Yeah, or if we go to a quarter, a half, I mean, whatever we decide.
Madam Chair, I think that's the opposite what Ms.
Yeah,
Rogers
I
said.
think what I heard was that a budget is presented, and then we have to determine the millage rate that will fund that budget. We don't go from, we need $10,000, so show me a $10,000 budget. We look at our budget, what is that number, and then what millage rate supports that. And if it's over the $500,000, we have to go back to the budgeting process and say, nope, too big, got to go back down. Can't fund that with a $500,000.
Chair? And I understand that's what you said, and I guess we know that we have a lot of need in our community. And I think it's going to, I feel like we've got to realize that we have a lot of need, and we're going to have a lot of upfront costs this first year in trainings, getting our community trained, the grassroots organizations understanding how to access the money we have. So, I guess creating the budget is we're going to have those pots that they talked about at the needs. I watched the meeting. And can it be as simple as we've got 3 pots and we're going to put X number of dollars in each pot? Or do we have to have something more specific than that? Do you know?
Well, a budget can be submitted in a line item fashion, or it can be presented as more of a whole presentation. So it depends on how discrete you request the budget to be submitted. So I think that's up to our committee to determine how discrete. Obviously, there's a fourth bucket, which is called overhead, that would need to absorb some funds as well. So yes, I think it just depends on what the committee comes up with, how discrete the budget is. I think each one of us will look at what's presented and say, I either need more information to know what's in this line item, or it's plenty of information. From someone who did contracting for 24 years, a cost reimbursement budget can be extraordinarily difficult to present and to support with line item definitions. Tell me about that travel line item. What does that include? How much mileage are you paying? How much hotels are you paying? How much conference travel is it? I mean, you can get very discrete in a budget narrative. So it sort of depends on what the committee comes up with and presents to the board, and do we need to be more discrete or not more discrete in our determinations. It may be enough for what's presented, or it may not be enough.
Madam Chair.
That's why it's good that it's may.
It actually may. I think it's more of a guesstimate than an estimate. I think because we don't have any historical knowledge of what things have cost. The only thing that our executive director can rely on would be budgets from other municipalities and trusts that have similar demographic issues, problems, populations that we have. And we probably would expect that this board will be making amendments to the budget as we go forward. And so, I mean, any initial budget is just an educated hypothesis guess. And so I would say that I would yield to our executive director to come back to us with some realistic numbers and costs that allows for us to have a conversation about, with knowing that it won't be exact, that it would probably will have amendments at some point.
I would like to just ask a question about the time frame of the budget. If the monies are coming in I think it was November, if I remember correctly, is when the revenues would come. Is this a November to October budget, a November to June budget, a November to September budget? I don't even know our fiscal year, if that's been defined.
Is that statute, Allison? What's our fiscal year?
No, it's our bylaws.
It's in our bylaws?
It's September 30th?
October to September 30th.
Same as the
So that would be, the budget would be in October to September?
I think that's, we go into, right, and then Dr. Smith could, in his committee, could, make 2 budgets. We could do one, they could do one for the interim and then one for, once we get our funds.
Madam President, I understand what has been said already, but I want to request, can we look at page 2 of what you submitted one more time, please, before we leave this issue? Can we do that?
Sure. I don't have the power to do that.
Next one. With the chart on it. Yeah, that one. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, yeah, that's a, well, even though the projected ad valorem return in District 3 is low, they did vote for this tax at 90% versus some of the others, so.
You're reading my mind, Mr. Commissioner.
I probably see why.
You're reading my mind.
Okay, so for the budget, just the finance discussion, Dr. Smith is going to help come up with the budget and the bank, insurance. And we'll meet, and by our next meeting, he'll have a report to give us.
And Madam Chair, I would hope, and Dr. Smith, to me, I mean, as a rule of thumb, I mean, we do a contingency at the county. I don't know what they do at the school board of about 10%. I think knowing the unknowns that there should be at least a 15% contingency with the ability for reallocation after we get 12 or 24 months in. Because, I mean, I think that would be good stewardship.
I think the statute specifically says, I read somewhere, but I can.
What does the statute say? And so maybe I didn't read that.
Well, it didn't say how much contingency, but it says contingency, I believe.
I mean, I think our standard rule, it's 10%, correct, Madam Attorney? Well, maybe we go 15.
Yes, Ms. Rogers.
There is a provision that your chair and anyone else on your organization who's going to have the authority to write checks needs to have a surety bond. That can be paid for by the trust, but they are obligated to have a surety bond in the amount of $1,000 for every $1 million of the annual budget. So just heads up, that's going to need to be folded into your expected expenses.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Any more discussion on finances and/or budget?
Madam Chair, if I can just make sure I have this correct, we will meet as a committee and report back at our next gathering here.
Right. And do you want to go ahead and make a date for the,
Yes, that would be great to do that.
When's our next board meeting, Madam Chair?
June? No, May 20th. Yes, May 25th.
Wow, we're gonna all become great friends.
But then the next one's not for a month, and then they're a month out.
Praise God.
I know.
I'm looking for a date. I just
Okay.
can't.
You're fine.
My calendar's, if we need to come back.
We can
later,
come, we can come back, we can come back and do that. CEO process, Ms. Appleyard put this on the agenda. She's worked very hard the past 2 weeks. So we do need to start looking, or we, if y'all want to, a discussion, do we want to start looking now for a CEO? Do you want to wait till after July 1st? We need to have a job description, timeline process, criteria.
If Madam Appleyard can start putting it together, I mean, I would expect that even after we hire someone, that she'd be on for 6 to 12 months. Getting them, I think the sooner the better, to get our person in so they can build. I mean, what I would like to do is hold the executive director responsible. And with that, I want the executive director to build their team. So if they fail or if they succeed with what they choose. And so my vote to allow for her, as she's bringing budget and looking at other job descriptions, to bring it back, and a recommendation on timeline and process from Ms. Appleyard.
I'll second that, because I think we had a lot of information presented from Ms. Watson with all the different executive director job descriptions. So I think we could put one together with the timeline, and, that leads into what Mr. Sachs said about letting them create their team, the legal services.
Right.
And anything else that we need. So I'm for that, because if that's possible by the 22nd to bring that back, or is that too soon?
Why don't we do that one by June?
Madam Chair, could I recommend maybe that you and the vice chair and the treasurer being the executive committee meet with the interim administrator to do that planning?
Yeah, that's fine.
Kind of an
We just wanted to- we wanted to bring
executive
it up.
committee direction.
Okay. And we'll find a date before we leave tonight for that.
You mean separately? You mean,
Yes,
or in the
separate.
sunshine?
Yeah, no, in the sunshine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but not with all attendees unless you want to come.
Gotcha.
So we will find a date for that as well, to meet. And maybe report back by June, the June board meeting for that.
Or whenever you get it ready.
Okay,
By June at the latest.
right, by June.
Ms. Appleyard wants to. Ms. Appleyard, you had a comment?
Some direction on a search, and if that's to be a funded search. I mean, it's just, as we set up the budget, it may not be much, but that's going to be a question that comes up, and we'll have to come back to you unless you answer it now.
I might recommend that the committee come back with that as part of the timeline. There would be a cost to the budget if we were going to pay for someone to travel in, or we're doing a national search,
And we're
those
talking
kind
about-
of things.
And the salary, I guess.
And the salary, yeah. I mean, all of that has to,
Okay. Report from Needs Subcommittee, we had and anyone who was there yesterday can jump in. We had a great meeting yesterday. We heard from some wonderful providers, and they just affirmed why we're here and what we're doing. I know Sean Salamita was there from I keep saying FFM, but he's not FFN anymore, from Lakeview. And we had the Judge Dan Heiser was there. We had Help the Start. We had Chief Escambia was there. We had some great providers who were there and just affirmed why we're doing what we're doing and excitement for it. And we came up with 3. We had just discriminate buckets, pillars, themes, priorities, whatever y'all want to call them, but basically ready kids, ready youth, ready families. And those are going to be our 3 priorities, buckets. So I'll take, if you want to, I want to keep consistent language, so 3 priorities for the year. And we can reassess those, the subcommittee can reassess that later on. Any other comments from the subcommittees?
I think, again, you summarized it very well and described it well. Michelle participated by audio-visual and suggested that we, at least one way of looking at it, is these larger 3 to 4 generic buckets, if you will, with the idea that then as we start getting the individualized needs and programs that we're looking at funding, that the likelihood that they would fit in one or perhaps even more of those several buckets will allow us to provide at least an umbrella start to allow Dr. Smith and others on his committee to begin formulating a budget. What am I trying to budget for? And that type of thing. So that I think you did a stellar job of describing it, and I would agree with you that a lot of enthusiasm, I think, by Sean and the organization he represents and the others that were there as well.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you for your leadership on it. I think it was a great meeting and great dialogue, and Superintendent Smith was there, so thank you. And I agree with the 3 buckets, so thank you so much.
Could you state what the 3 buckets are?
They're ready kids, ready children, ready youth, and ready families. And Dr. Smith, you did have a recommendation as well that we go back to the public for approval of those 3.
Yes, one of the recommendation that we came from that meeting with was to come up with a format, perhaps using a web-based format, where we can put out something with just a general overview with the 3 buckets, but really seeking approval or affirmation from our community and casting a wide net, really to just have people respond, we're on board with this, or we have concerns. And so really looking for affirmation from residents. And part of that, too, is we want to be very transparent. We want our residents to be involved with this process. It is our community's process and organization, so for the good of our children. So that's one of the pieces embedded in that reaching out to the community, is to make sure we are hearing the voice of our community.
I think Tori also brought up the concept very appropriately in my estimation that to get where we are here and now, the public was already provided with a bill of sales of some sort, so to speak, and a description of things, and that part of what Dr. Smith has described is an acknowledgement back out to the public that we heard you all. We are sincere in our efforts to align what we're doing with what you all were told as the voting public that led to where we are now. And here's where we're going to go, as we're now starting to actually talk about real dollars and cents and expenditure of resources and those types of things, that we are responding to the approval that was granted to us and the confidence that was given to us to put all of this together now and all. And that is what part of the notification, whether it be on the website or some other way. I was looking on my computer earlier, and they had a nice mention of that already there, mentioning those 3 already. So somebody's very quickly.
I guess I need a clarification. I did watch the needs assessment meeting, and I think these 3 items were part of the the package that sold the referendum. They were already on the website. These are the 3 that people bought into, that they approved it. So when Dr. Smith says we're going to put it out and see if they're going to buy in, I'm kind of wondering, does that mean then we'll change what we're going to do? Or would it be more appropriate for us to do an announcement of this is where we are, these are the things that we're going to move forward with, to announce to the community that, you know, if you're an organization out there that feels like you fit into a bucket, you know, be ready when we're ready to go. I'm just kind of reluctant to put something out with somebody with thinking that they're going to come back and change our minds. I just wanted a clarification on that.
I think with our recommendation, first of all, we wanted to share it this evening, so we do have discussion about that, because we certainly want to make sure what we're putting out is effective and efficient as well. So I think we were looking at really a very centralized message of, we're moving forward, here's reiterating these 3 points, and are you still supporting that, as 61% of the voters had in the referendum? But that's a good point. I mean, what happens if it comes back a no? We're kind of in a position there.
Jim, it's going to matter. Listen, the die has been cast. The votes have been counted. The geographics have been presented of who passed this tax and who didn't. And so, you know, and that's important to me. Although I agree with Dr. Northup that it's for all of Escambia County.
Yes.
There was collateral material and a targeted demographics of a systemic issue in which this committee presented to this community for funding and help. And so I think that as we open it up, if we were to open up to have a large discussion, as you said, it passed 61%. But let me tell you, in my district, it passed 90%. In some districts, it only passed 40 or 50%. So if you go with my colleague that sits in the north end, it's anti-tax, and they would have horrible things to say about this social program that's coming forward. If you were coming to my district, a district that has, you know, 3 or 4, you all know, Title I schools, I mean, it would be more receptive, but the expectations are a lot higher. And so I think that as we have this discussion, that we have to realize the intent of why it was passed, and understanding that we are not going to be able to wipe this broad brush over this whole community and alleviate poverty, dysfunction, all those things, that I think that it has to be targeted. And quite frankly, the messaging and the promotion of passing this wasn't a targeted, it was a targeted campaign, without a doubt. And so I think that the target of how we present those resources has to be in line with where we target it to get the support. So I agree with you. I think at all times we should have input, but I don't want to get input to the way in which it disrupts what we're doing, because it can easily become a political animal of those who are anti. I mean, you can open up a public forum. I mean, you're talking 40% of the population going against something is a lot of people. I mean, they could cause a ton of disruption. So I'm with you. I'm always about, you know, open government, open participation, but I do understand that not everyone is a stakeholder in this idea that we have for this Children's Trust Fund. So I would just keep that in mind as we move forward in the community.
What if we just did a press release and Ms. Appleyard is...
One thing I think we need to clarify is what the website is.
That's the next,
website.
yeah, that's number 9, yeah.
And thank you to Achieve Escambia, wherever you are. They are the ones that
Have kept it
pivoted
up.
from their work to do the campaign. They got the website up, the Children's Trust website.
Yes.
It's pretty much been dormant since, because I don't know if this board asks permission, how you do that, but somehow to take that framework we need to update it. That will be a great place to put a message. They have other social media platforms, press release, billboards, whatever you want to do with the time as we walk through this process. But first, I think we need to know we're working off their work so far and
So, I mean, Madam Chair, and so, and Dr. Smith, I quite frankly concur with you and school board member. I think that we have to have citizen input of the services, although we presented that out. I agree with you. There has to be stakeholder, has to be DAO sessions. We have to be in neighborhoods listening to people. And I don't know if that's as a committee or subcommittee or staff, but I do agree, or whether it's through the Mason-Dixon that we talked about, or whether through the Hall Center, I think that as we make decisions, we need to hear the voices of the people that are closest to the problem. So I agree that we have to make sure that that's there.
We tend to be on the same page tonight. It's amazing.
Well, Patty, we've always been on the same page. I don't know why you let people separate us.
But I think that was where after I got the clarification, because I think that what we need to do is we get this budget together, we've got our 3 buckets or however many, and then we go to the community for town hall meetings to say, this is what we're doing, these are things that we think would fit here, and then that's where we're going to get, we have to go to the people, we can't expect
Yeah,
them to
well, we
come
go to the
here.
people. People are not going to come down here. I mean, if we're not in Oakwood Terrace, if we're not at CAYs, if we're not at Lincoln Park, the very things that we utilize, I mean, let me just tell you, and I say this on the record, when this was presented to us to go to the taxpayer, it was a bunch of African-American children on a flyer that they did to mail out, and they targeted those neighborhoods. And so if we're going to take their vote, we darn well are going to go back into the neighborhood to understand what at least they think is best for them. And so for me, we should do that. And I agree when Mr. Northrup is talking about moving meetings. Let's go to the people who lack transportation in Pensacola Village. Let's have a meeting in their community center and go and listen to exactly what they say. And then it's up to us as elected leaders, or appointed leaders, to come back and formalize that and to be able to present our program or our funding source to help address those issues that they bring forth. So, Patty, we're always on the same page. I mean, we only had one disagreement.
Commissioner, I better interrupt you while you're talking like that right now. So we're blessed, some of us are blessed to live in that circle and to walk in that circle every day, to talk and converse with the very people that we're talking about. I'm smiling and laughing on the inside because that concern from the people that we are here to serve will not be lost. As long as I, for one, have enough physical ability to be where I'm sitting now. We're going to remember that. Don't worry about that. We're going to remember why we're here, period, and what we're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So back to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we appreciate that. And that was, I think, mostly the intent, rather than saying, here, try something, because we recognize we'd be going back and forth with that discussion all the time. But on the other hand, we did want to be brand new to this, so new, knowing that there are 40% of the population that is not sold on this at this point, that we're wanting to make sure and double sure that we're being transparent with this. And as Tori brought up, she used the analogies, you all that were there with her grandma, expecting to see, you came to me and sold me a bill of goods, and now you all are starting to, really implement that and operationalize it. And what y'all are doing is over here, and what you told me was over there. We've got a problem. And that's the intent, is just to say, we did hear you guys up front. We are making headway. We are trying to meet some of those community needs. And here's what we're doing, rather than asking so much for their individual approval so much at this point. But certainly at all times asking for their input and how can we do what we're doing better and those types of things.
So it's more just, what we're going to do is just more do a press release, put it on the website, which we're going to get to discussion next. And that's what we're going to do for our priorities. And then we'll definitely go into the communities and have those town halls and hear from those.
As she said, Achieve has done the work.
Right, Achieve has done the work.
We know what
Right.
what the issues are.
Any more comments on the needs subcommittee? All right, let's go to the website real quick, and then we'll do one more thing, and then we'll do public comments. All right, website discussion. We got to get. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up because I did hear some conversation about it at the Needs Subcommittee, and kind of as a background, the committee, the Chief of Escambia put the website up, well, the referendum team, I think, did that. And Chief of Escambia used, I think it's off of their site, but they used campaign funds to keep it going, leftover campaign funds. So some of the things that have been able to be uploaded there, like the minutes from our meetings and the notices of meetings. And I just really think that, I don't know what the process is to get Carolyn Appleyard as the administrator, to change it over so that it becomes our website that we put things on. As she has her sidekick now, that, we can become, it can be a source of information for the community. But I did hear some conversation, and I didn't know whether everybody wanted to keep that one going or if somebody wanted to create a new one, but that would not be me.
The judge.
Just a point of clarification, isn't there a cost associated with this? Okay, again, we don't have any money.
But yes, that's the budget. That's what we will have Dr. Smith and our team his team work on. But do we need to make a motion to allow Carolyn to be able to have access to that website? Or do you already have access? The Chief's website. So Chief has to.
So can we just request that Achieve continues to do that pro bono as they've done until we can get a budget?
I think
They're not doing it pro bono. They're using leftover campaign funds, is what I understand.
Oh, they still have some more money. I mean, I'm good either way. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, but we don't have any money to allocate. I mean, I don't think we can authorize.
we don't have a budget yet.
Yeah, we
so
don't have a
can't.
budget.
But it could be a line item.
Madam Chair, could we
Right.
just ask Carolyn to meet with Achieve Escambia and see if a mutual agreement can be worked out so she has access to it and can represent the trust as the runner of or the admin of that website? And if they are oppositional to that, then we need to come back and address our own resources to have our own website.
Right.
And I think they're not. They've done this to hand on.
Yeah, Achieve doesn't have an oppositional bone in their body.
I just had to state it for the record that it might be a possibility.
Okay, so we'll do that. Yeah, we'll hand it off. We need to come back and we need dates for the budget committee and dates for the executive committee.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Just very quickly, speaking of the Budget Committee, you had talked about coming back in June, but I'm wondering if we already have the sample job descriptions and the budget's going to be meeting, can't we discuss May 25th, at least
Part of
what
that,
our
yes.
description and what our
For the job, yes. I
budget
just didn't
will
know if
be? Okay,
Ms.
cool.
Applegard would have time between now and then to come up with everything that we needed to discuss.
I have for the Finance Committee, is that what we're calling it? The Finance Committee?
Budget.
Finance Plan.
Budget Planning Committee is what the bylaws say.
Budget Planning Committee, thank you. For that, I have two possible dates to propose. Wednesday, May 19th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or Monday, May 24th at 10:30 in the morning. I believe we can host those at the school board.
What's May 24th and what's the other one, Doc?
May 19th?
May 24th would be great.
That works for me.
May 24th.
Except our meeting is
The
the 25th.
25th,
That's
I
fine,
believe.
that's fine. Yes. We'll have time to report that.
Okay, so May 24th. It's good with everybody? Monday, May 24th at 10:30 a.m.
And then,
And we can meet at the Hall Center, which is the school board office on Tahar.
and then you also said the 19th, you said at 3 o'clock. Could we do that one for the executive committee meeting, since you're open that day?
Yes, we can arrange that,
Okay.
that as well.
Well, he's already open, so why find another date? Well, we need to discuss the job description, CEO process, so we'll go ahead and do that on the 19th
Okay.
at 3 o'clock for the executive committee. If Tori's available, right, exactly. but.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't mean to force your meeting, I was just thinking there was.
Well, no,
something-
we have to have a meeting, yeah, that's fine. We, no, that we needed to have the meeting, but we just, he told us that was a day. Okay. All right, public comments. We have Mr. Washington.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I just want to say, I don't have much time, so I was getting a little itchy, nervous. Got to pick up some kids. We have a tutorial program where the kids are getting out, and some kids getting out of basketball. So I got to pick some kids up and kind of keep it moving. But I would like to say, my name is Benny Washington. I have over 30 years of teaching and coaching experience. I've worked for a nonprofit, James B. Washington Education and Sports, and we have an academic tutorial program, and we have a basketball program. This program primarily deals with at-risk youth in the underserved community. Our goal is to increase graduation and to decrease gangs, incarceration, juvenile delinquents. And we've been doing this for 3 years. I just want to make sure that we are included when things start going out. I've been trying to get with Dr. Smith. I've called a couple times, haven't been able. Ms. Hightower, I've spoken with you. And we're looking to go into the Warrenton area, expand into the Warrenton area. We're on 2020 North Palafox. And we want a partnership with the Warrenton Middle School, West Pensacola, what's going over there. Now, what I see all the time is, it started in youth sports, and it's just one of the small problems. A lot of times these kids are playing sports. They're playing ball, football, baseball, basketball, excellent athletes. But the kids are playing with 2 and 3 Fs. And then by the time they get to middle school and high school, there's a grade point average requirement. We require 2.5 grade point average. Now, if they 2.0, we still gonna let them play. But by the time some of those kids get to middle school and high school, they are academically ineligible. And then we also seeing those kids, well, they can't go to Plan B, let's concentrate on the academics, because a lot of them are 1 and 2 years behind academically. So those kids are dropping out of school, and it's kind of like that from the schoolhouse to the jailhouse. You know, kind of like from the, enslavement to mass incarceration. These terms people don't want to hear. It's really happening out there. And we're fighting this every day. And we have kids, but we don't have the funding. And I know some programs have the funding, but they don't have the kids. And they're not going into the Morris Coast and the Pensacola Village. And I know Commissioner May, he does an excellent job of doing that. But we need some help reaching those kids, and then trying to find a partnership to work with the school system, at least in the summertime. I would just like to leave this flyer where we have Summer Youth Enrichment Program, and that's to avoid that summer slide with the kids. Keeping kids involved the first 3 hours, they're doing math, English, science, social studies. Then we playing games, checkers, chess, dominoes, Scrabble, Monopoly, games that make them think. And we take them on all kind of field trips. They might go swimming. We might take them to the zoo. We might take them to Mobile, to the Science Exploratorium. We're doing a lot of things with these kids, and it's making a big difference. We've taken them to Tallahassee, to the Capitol, Florida State, Florida A&M, Alabama State. We're doing a lot of things, but when we got to get out here and kind of struggle, with the finances, and these kids don't have anything. We can't get in the gym, and they want to charge us $160 an hour just to practice. It's a lot of different things that's going on that we need some help with. Our organization is willing to jump in with both hands and both feet. We're doing it already. It's not like we're upcoming new program. You probably don't know much about us because we too busy working, and it's hard to get away. So just take us under consideration. How you doing, Ms. Albion? I just appreciate any help that you can give us and how we can assist the community in any kind of way. We're here to be helpful. I don't mean to run out on you. If you have any questions, yes, sir.
First, very impressive, and appreciate your efforts and what you all are doing at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do you have a ballpark, as you all have been doing this for several years now, of what your average kind of participation or enrollment number is, or how many kids you all are able to care for it right at this point? I understand y'all have got limited funding.
Yeah, at this point, in the tutorial program, we have about 23 kids. Now, because of COVID, of course, we had to scale back, all right? And the basketball program, the basketball is kind of what's getting the kids. We go in some of these lower income areas, and I said tutoring the kids, they're not coming, but if I throw the ball out there, they come. And when they start coming, then we start checking grades. So we kind of use the software. We have a couple of tutors, and we trying to raise money to pay the tutors. Everybody said do it for free. Volunteer, when they think a nonprofit, we have overhead too. We have expenses that we have to kind of take care of too. So we probably have about over 100 kids in the basketball program, 25 in the tutorial program, but we got 1,200 square feet. That's the building that we're operating out at 2020 North Palafox. I'm turning people away. You know, we can use that excuse, COVID. We can't have no more kids. But things beginning to clear up a little bit. So now we can't accommodate it because we don't have the space. I have so many kids coming for tutoring now more than ever before. And now I can take 8 or 9 kids at a time. We're doing it 3 days a week. But the need is there. We just don't have the funding or the space. You know, the school board, I don't know if y'all got a gym or something, or a school that's closed down that we can kind of operate. And I'm not trying to start a school. I've done that, okay? Not doing that. It's an after-school program. And if these kids don't have something to do 4 or 5 days a week, 2 or 3 days of tutoring, 2 or 3 days of sports, if they just sit in their communities, in those low-income province areas, you have crime, you have everything you can think of. They're going to get in trouble just sitting on the porch. You know, trouble just find them. So we are being proactive. Now, there are a lot of dollars out there for kids that are AMI kids, or kids that have been in juvenile detention, or people that have been in prison. We're trying to, you know, get them back on the right track. But for just a regular kid that want to do something, there's not much funding out there. At least I haven't come across it. We haven't come across it. And I would just like you all to just take us under consideration. I have much more information for you that I can give to you. Sit down and talk. But we are on the grounds. And like I said, some people, they have the funding. They don't have the kids, and they call us, want us to bring our kids, and they getting the dollars, and you're going to give us a Subway sandwich and a bag of chips. And that's not going to get it, because we going in these areas where some people don't want to go, and we making some leeway, but now everybody want to come, and we need a bigger space. We need more funding to have more people. And I'd love to sit down at another time to discuss these things, but I got to pick up some kids from tutoring and some kids from basketball. I mean,
Thank you
for the
so
time.
much.
Thank you all.
And
Okay.
you'll make sure the public will know when these requests come out. We'll have a request for proposals for people like you to ask for money. So we're not there yet. We'll get there soon.
I just want to get in on the ground floor, and I think I'm about 5 floors behind.
Coach White, I appreciate you, and I love to hear you talk, but I got about 80 or 90 kids in the gym right now, and they need rides home too, so I got to get out here and go pick them up.
All right.
Chair, it's also.
Thank you so much, Mr. Washington. All right, Mr. Brown.
Thanks, Coach.
Mr. Brown.
Good evening, Chairman White, and to the board. Full disclosure, Mr. May is one of my board members. I am the executive director of the Community Action Program. I'm Doug Brown. We are the grant.
Full disclosure, Benny Washington started in my program about 2 years ago, so you're right. That's what we talked about, the tentacles of connection, so you're right, Doug, thanks.
I'm thinking about what you all are doing. I've been a part of the discussion of a children's trust a couple of years ago when Bruce Watson brought it to the body at I guess an annual meeting. Did it for a couple of years until it finally got traction. And as I was sitting here, I wrote down a couple of things, and I really want to just talk about some of the challenges. I got here a document, and I'll make a copy and send it to whomever. This is annually what the Head Start program requires of every Head Start grantee. It's a program information report. It goes into every detail of every demographic you can track. The federal government is really, really good at that. We track it all. We know the number of kids. We know everything that we can about the families in this community. And we do that for 735 kids, 0 to 5, between here and Escambia, Century. So when the gentleman was talking about the logo, the beauty of that logo is the county map in the middle of it. And if you think about the reach of kids from the Tanyards up to Century, the miles are vast, but the challenges are the same. Their opportunities have been determined by where they were born. So I'm thinking about equity, and you were talking about even serving. We have a board, and by federal statute, we're required to have a board that has low-income folks that serve, so they have a voice in guiding how we serve a community. We think hard about people that serve, and while 3 hours drive may be not a problem for a seasoned professional, it makes a big difference if you're in Century and you don't have bus fare and you want to serve, but you can't serve because you don't want to tell the people that you serve with that you're not financially in the same category as they are. So I say that as you're looking at this body of governance, you consider that finance has no indication of input, value, and intellect, and those individuals need a space to participate. So I implore you to reconsider options that allow that. So I'll continue. Low birth weights, I'm just going to go down a list because it's late. Low birth weight, prenatal care, lack of prenatal dentistry, diabetes, asthma, behavioral health, behavioral health, behavioral health, behavioral health. Dr. Smith and the teachers know that behavioral health coming out of pandemic is a challenge, and our solution is not the right one because we don't have enough practitioners for early education. So we add another person in the classroom so that the two teachers can teach the rest of the kids so that the kid with the behavioral issues gets the attention they deserve. But for that third teacher, that classroom doesn't get the educational experience that they need. But for the behavioral health professional, I don't need to be paying for a third teacher that's really not doing anything but watching a kid. So I say that to say there's a need in this community, I think, for a deep understanding of the number of professionals that serve 0 to 5 in the behavioral health space. We're in a crisis in this country. We're in a crisis in this county. I'm just telling you what we see. Second, and beyond that, the number of teachers, Head Start nationally has a requirement that your teachers have a bachelor's degree. And we underwrite that. We pay for that. We pay for that, and then we lose that teacher to the school district because we can't compensate them in turn with their peers. There's no institution, West Florida, University of West Florida, or Pensacola State College, that are producing early education credentialed individuals. You've got to go to Troy, you've got to go to Niceville, you got to go somewhere. So when you start looking at the realities of how we are dealing with this workforce issue, we're not creating it. We're bringing it from somewhere else and we're losing it to somebody else. It's a holding pattern. So if you want quality, retention is a need, which means we've got to pay better. So I'm going to pivot on a couple things because, again, it's late. The maximum mill you can produce is needed. One of the things that the gentleman spoke to is the need of the nonprofits that's nothing more than a tax designation. It's not a business strategy. It's a tax designation. He's got to pay Gulf Power for his 1,200 feet. That's not enough. And the dollars that he's getting to pay that is coming from who knows where. When he starts talking about college trips, the dollars to pay for that is coming from who knows where. His mission is those kids. The pain for him is coming down here and having to explain that to you guys. And I say that with all due respect because I don't know the gentleman, but I know that story. So I say that to say, as you all are doing this, there's varying tiers of nonprofits that are going to come before you. Some of them, like me, got a multi-million-dollar budget and I got a staff and I'm still in need. Still in need. And there's others who are on a shoestring and faith that are just doing good works and they don't have a balance sheet. but they know every kid and they know every mom, and they need a process for them to get access to those dollars so that they can build their systems and be better competing for additional dollars. I don't know how you all do that, but if you don't do that, those that are in the weeds, in those communities where this was created to address, unless you're giving those folks the resources to build themselves too, those communities are going to be, in effect, served by organizations that are nice folks but don't know the community. So I say that to say, in this space of equity, in this space of all the things we've gone through as a country over the last couple of years, while you're doing this work, keep equity in mind when you're thinking about who you're hiring, who you're putting a contract in the hands of, because all of it matters to the folks that made this happen. Lastly, I'll say there's a cadre of folks that worked for a long time. Achievers Gambia was kind of probably the backbone of it. They're still there. If you need them, they're all willing to help. So I say that to say you've got an advisory that's already there. They're invisible to you until you form them. I say that to say community action has been here since 1965. It's hard as hell. I can't say it any other way. We work with 0 to 75, 85, 95. We work with youth serving organizations, after school programs. We're funding those things. We're trying to create more. And we're just one piece to that. Facilities, 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 facilities. I said last thing, I gotta leave there. You can't tell a kid or you can't tell a parent that this is great and it's shabby and looks half done. If you want excellence, then provide excellence. I can't say that another way. Communities are tired of getting what's left over and said, now go be excellent with it. That's just not right. So I say that to say, I'm passionate about it. I know you all are too. It's a long night, but we can't be tired. We can't be tired because there's some kids somewhere who, but for this Children's Trust, but for Coach Washington picking them up and taking them home, ain't no telling where those kids would be. And there's too many that we can say we're sorry about. We can do more. Thank you.
That's our last public comment for tonight, so I move to adjourn.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
In full disclosure, Doug and Benny are hangout friends of mine.
Well,
But as we move forward in policy, as I know that we're going to have those who oppose this and come, I would petition the chair to have some type of time limit and restrictions on public comment for the orderly fashion of the meeting.
Yes, sir. We can discuss that at the next board meeting.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair.
No. No, I did not set a bylaw subcommittee meeting.
Can we wait and
We
do
can
that the
wait.
next
Let's
time?
do that
Because you've got
we've
lots
got a
of
lot going on.
meetings. And I think as we go through these different discussions, we will find more things that need to go into policy. But I will start looking at the policies that already exist. No need in creating something that we can just copy.
Yes, Mr. Sachs.
Madam Chair, as I mentioned last meeting, I will not be able to make the May 25 meeting.
Okay,
But I'll
well,
be watching you from Orlando.
Well, we appreciate all your insightful and and you have
I'll
very
see you in
wise
June.
comments.
And tell Mickey we said hello.
Yes. All right, so move to adjourn.
So move.
Okay.
You all still have enough for a quorum. I won't be in Orlando watching.
Thank you all.